Hi, everybody. Good to be with you. We're going to start this Crushing Doubt Q&A in a second. I'm just going to get my Instagram going, and then we will be ready to go talking about mind-body issues. Give me 1 second, and we will get started. All right. We got everything rolling. Oh, wait. I got something blocking my screen here. Let's get that out of the way. Okay. Welcome, everybody. It is great to be back with you. I did take a couple weeks off. Every once in a while, everybody needs a vacation. I needed to get in my power column and do what I needed to do. So I'm sorry I wasn't there with you all, but I do hope you continue to use all the resources at your disposal, my book, my podcast, any of the things that are available on my website, which is www.crushingdoubt.com. And we're going to talk about all of what's available, but let's first talk about what we're doing here. So I'm here to talk about mind-body symptoms. And of course, those are symptoms that begin in the brain with thinking or with feeling and then become very, very real in your body. Why do I do this? Because, as many of you know, I had 8 years of chronic everyday back pain. Every single day, I did not have any sense that I was going to get better. Doctors couldn't help. The alternative medicine fields didn't seem like they could help. There was very little that seemed that I could do. I got some help here and there, but it never got below 70% of the overall horrible feeling during that entire time. And it came out of nowhere. And I was 28 years old. Didn't make any sense to me. So what ended up happening? Like many of you out there, I discovered Dr. John Sarno's work. And it's criminal how much people don't know about that work. And that's part of the reason that I'm here talking about this, is to spread the word about how important this information is. It is scientific, it is logical, it is right on, and it works. What I have done, though, is learned from my experience reading Dr. Sarno's book, where I then got better in a couple of months. And when it really clicked, it was just a couple of days. So I kind of got a book cure, but I also kind of had to soak in the information and get to a point where I really understood it. And that's usually what needs to happen. I have since worked with thousands of people on getting their mind-body experiences head to toe, not just back pain. Anything that the mind, that the body can do, the mind can use it. So any symptom that the body can do at all, the mind can co-opt for mind-body reasons. And the key here is that we are working to get past anything that's seemingly chronic. It's not going to be chronic. We can get past it. We're also here to help you manage acute symptoms, the onsets and upticks of symptoms. Those acute symptoms, that relates to emotions, the feelings. So we're going to talk about where thinking comes into play about the seemingly chronic and the feelings about the onsets and upticks. We're also going to talk about power, which is your relationship to yourself. And that determines these symptom plateaus. A lot of times people are getting better, but they just kind of get stuck. That usually means there's some kind of conflict with the self. So let's talk a little bit about my system, and then we'll dive right in with some questions and answers, because of course that's what I'm here to do. First, let me say, why do I find answering these questions to be so important? Because when I was getting better, I didn't have any of the answers, and that was the whole problem. And then when I discovered Dr. Sarno, I started getting major answers, but not all of them, but enough that it gave me true hope that I could get better. And as things made more sense, I got more and more hope that I could get better. And then it started to change what was going on up here, changed what went on down here in my body. The muscles in my back, they went back to normal. And I've been playing full court basketball for 12 of the 14 years. It took me a little while to get fully back to it because it felt so scary. Maybe be 13 of the years. But I'm back to totally normal. And if anything, better, because I know what the symptoms mean. I know how to use them. So we're going to be working with my system, which I call the column system. It's just called columns because I used to have people divide a sheet of paper up into columns to organize this information. And it is all about understanding feeling, thinking, and your relationship with yourself. The feeling section of this work is the emotions column. That's where we look at the onsets and upticks in symptoms and help you understand how to manage acute symptoms. This is not just about getting rid of chronic symptoms, though that is definitely a major part of it. It's also about controlling acute ones. It is also about controlling and getting rid of seemingly chronic symptoms. That's where thinking comes into play, and that's what I call the doubt column. Doubt is anything where you don't think you can get better. Whatever it is, any worry that you have, it comes in 4 different forms. It comes in fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and unanswered questions. So answering these questions here is designed to bring down that doubt. And lastly, the power column. The power column is that relationship with yourself, understanding what your trauma was, accepting it more fully, understanding how you're going to make adjustments to change things. So when I answer these questions, I'm going to be talking about these columns and how we think about them, because ultimately it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. So I've got to give you some tools that help you know what to do when. Let me say hi to a couple people, then we'll dive in with some questions. Catherine Toomer, thank you for joining us on Instagram. Carrie Tischler, good to see you as well. And Jana MSK, thank you for joining us on Instagram as well. All right, Ani Crowfoot, good to see you. Ani is a coach in the field who I recently she was in my latest training. So I do train people in the column system. If that's something you're interested in, please do get in contact with me, dan@crushingdoubt.com. Karen Isaacs, good to see you here. Dorisa says, hi, Dan and Crushing Doubt community. Great to see you. And Marina and Nush, I see you have questions. So we will get to those shortly. But I'm going to be here on a fairly regular basis from here on out. I actually don't see any time throughout August and September that I'm going to be away on Thursdays. So we're going to get right back to rolling about this. But I want to encourage you of a couple things. One, when I answer anyone's question, try to remember every piece of information matters. The more it makes sense to you, the more you have every chance to get better and will get better. As soon as it all makes sense to you, you'll know what to do when. And that's a huge part of what we talk about is moment-to-moment experience. It's not one size fits all, even for one person. There's different moments. So pay attention when I answer a question. See how it's relevant to you. Okay? El Bajoberto, thank you for joining us here on Instagram. Please do let me know if you have any questions. All right, let's get into some questions. Soaring High, thank you for joining us here as well. Okay, Karen Isaac says, I'm noticing when a symptom is rage versus sadness. The symptom may still come, but at least I know right away. All right, so, and I would love to hear more thoughts on this, Karen, when you have a chance. But distinguishing your feelings is part of the work. So let's talk about the emotions column in this regard. The emotions and power column are both what I call emotional columns. The emotions column is where we get the awareness about our emotions. And where do we get it from? From the symptoms. The symptom onsets and upticks, they are exact. The timing is exact. And we can learn all kinds of things about what we're feeling in ways that we wouldn't know about otherwise. So listen, you guys all know a lot about what you're feeling. I'm not saying you don't. But from an unconscious standpoint, how do you discover what's going on unconsciously? Well, it isn't a great mystery. And it's especially not a great mystery if we are paying attention to our bodies. So much of the time, I think that I'm fine, but my body tells me I'm not. And Karen, I think what you're saying is that you're starting to get some deep emotional awareness about the distinction. I'll put the question up again. The distinction between rage and sadness. They're both what we call negative emotions and that we don't like having them, but they're very different kinds of emotions. And it's great to know when is which. You said the symptom may still come, but at least I know right away. Okay, so let me take it a step further though, Karen, and I hope this will be helpful to you. It's great that you can know what that feeling is, but you can get even more relief, I think, in the emotions column. And especially, here's the trick, getting even more specific. So when you're having rage, that's very good to know about, but it's even better to know about if you know why. Why are you having that rage? And I'll give you some examples. Like you could be feeling like this person who's really important to me is really not seeing what's going on for me. And I don't like not being seen. I had too much of that when I was a kid or a young adult or in my life now. And it becomes an issue that can lead directly to a symptom. So we got to get more specific. That's just one example, Karen. Could be that, you came to feel like, there's too much badness in the world. We never get along with each other. Or it could be that you feel like you know exactly what's going on for you, but if you said it to somebody, you don't believe that somebody's going to believe you. That's not a good feeling either. So there's tons of sub feelings, let's say. So fantastic that you can distinguish between rage and sadness, anger and sadness, because those are different emotions. And one thing that I will say is anger tends to lead to more emotions column symptoms than sadness. So does anxiety. Anger and anxiety, we like them even less. We don't like to feel sad, but when you really connect to sadness, a lot of times you can just be with it and let it be, and you can accept it. It's very hard to accept an angry situation because something's really out of whack. You're not liking it in a bigger way. That being said, sadness, especially when it gets to very high levels, like with mourning, that can lead to lots of symptoms as well. Ultimately, it's about, are you aware of it? So, Karen, I think it's great. You're noticing the differences. I just want to encourage you that continues to unfold. I've seen it in you. You've gotten better and better at recognizing what's happening when. And that gives you more control over those acute symptoms. That's what the emotions column is for. Okay, let's keep going with questions. Karen, let me know if you have any further insights or questions about that. All right. I'm going to enlarge my screen a bit because this is a little small. Okay. So Marina, good to see you here. She says, my foot MRI shows structural problems such as scar tissue, bursitis/effusions, and don't know if this also affects the nerves. How to know if the pain is all structural or TMS. Now, TMS is what Dr. Sarno called mind-body issues. Originally called it tension myositis syndrome. He later changed it to tension myoneural syndrome. But it's basically just another equivalent for mind-body symptoms or neuroplastic symptoms, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. The mind and the body's interaction leading to symptoms. Now, Marina then says it is constant and doesn't change with emotions. How to know if it's TMS or structural. Okay, I'm going to say a couple things, Marina. One, first of all, the fact that it doesn't change with emotions, what that means is this is a doubt column symptom. Doubt column symptoms don't change with emotions. They pretty much don't change at all. So sometimes people say to me, well, I don't know if it's mind-body because it doesn't change. Listen, there are mind-body symptoms that change all the time. They're emotionally driven. And there are mind-body symptoms that stay in the same place because we're thinking about things in the same way and we have doubt about it. Marina, your symptoms are doubt. That's why they don't change with emotions. Now, when your doubt comes low enough, then you'll actually be able to see changes with emotions. But doubt buries everything. So in the column system, I say there's a flow to it. Bring down doubt, then learn about emotions, and then you'll flow into power and make adjustments in your relationship with yourself. Don't worry about the emotions or power, Marina. For you, with those symptoms that are seemingly unchangeable, they are changeable. But this is a doubt-related experience. In specific for you, it's fear. Fear is the form of doubt that is taking over for you. How do I know that? Because your symptoms behave like what is called a neuroplastic feedback loop. Some people's symptoms come in at a very high level and they're more stubborn at first. And that is because of this neuroplastic feedback loop where something very big emotionally happened. And then it led to a huge amount of fear in relation to your physicality. And then it led to obsessions. And those three things determine whether you have a neuroplastic feedback loop. The majority of people with mind-body symptoms do not have a neuroplastic feedback loop. I'm not saying that is bad news for you, Marina, because all of this can be cured anyway. It all works the same way. It just takes a bit longer because the whole nervous system got shocked and you just were in a higher fear state. By the way, I have had one of these neuroplastic feedback loops and my back pain was not it. I had it with my foot. So it's just like you're saying, Marina. In fact, it's very common with extremities. Feet and hands are the most common manifestations for neuroplastic feedback loops. But we can work at this. Now, let's get back to your first question. What's structural versus not? Now, one of the reasons that I can distinguish what's structural versus not is I've studied all of this. I've asked questions. I've talked to the doctors in the field. I've read Dr. Sarno. I've seen the journal articles. In the scientific journals, the very scientific journals these doctors are trained in. And so many of the seeming structural issues that maybe could plausibly cause pain don't. They do not. So even if it's plausible, it turns out to be wrong. Scar tissue does not cause pain. Bursitis does not cause pain. Effusions, that doesn't cause pain either. Your pain is mind-body. Now, here's the thing. Doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. Why is that? Because your mind is the one that needs to be changed for your mind-body symptoms to get better. Now, I'm right. But it doesn't matter that I'm right until you can see why. So we need to talk that through. But the first thing I'll say is, how do you distinguish these structural problems? We have tons of lists that mind-body professionals, including medical doctors, can tell you that's not a structure that's going to matter. And the vast majority of the structures don't matter. The structures that do tend to matter are things like internal organs that don't heal or don't heal as well. If you have some kind of injury to your pancreas or to your liver, that's different. They don't heal as well. But your entire musculoskeletal system and your nerves all heal really well. Now, some might argue, well, nerves can be slower to heal than others. I've heard that before. I'll tell you what I think about that, though. I don't think that's likely to be true. I think that what is, unless it was a very serious injury, because nerves do grow back more slowly than other tissue. But you didn't even have that. And the reason I don't think that nerve issues usually are anything but mind-body is because, in addition to the fact that the body just heals, so many times people talk about the events that happened that led to these things, and they're just not that serious. They shouldn't be that serious. And it also just doesn't ring true to me that, we have got all these mind-body issues, but in this specific area, no, not so much. What I find is that it all works the same way. Doubt tries to fool us that one symptom is different than another, and it just isn't. So let's start there. How do you know if the pain is all structural or TMS? Your pain is all TMS. Now, let's also keep in mind, TMS or mind-body symptoms can lead to actual physical changes. So if you're having, blood flow changes to that foot, if temperature issues are happening, that's very common with neuroplastic feedback loops. You have mind-body issue going on for sure. But we've got to figure out, how do I get you convinced of that? Let's go from there. Let's do follow-up questions as needed. All right. Chanel, thank you for joining us here. Good to see you. Shir Nach, thank you for joining us from Israel. Saris Jones, good to see you. Bana Bonita, thank you for joining us as well. Okay. Soaring High says, my foot MRI shows structural MRI. Oh, that actually is the same thing, isn't it? So that must be Marina. Okay, so that was the same question coming in from Instagram and YouTube. I already answered it, Marina, on YouTube, so let me know what you think. Okay. Now, you did have something more to say about it on Instagram. You said doctors claim they do, oddly. Now, when you're talking about these different structures, yes, they do claim they do. This is part of the problem that we run into. And it's a tricky spot for society because you've got some medical doctors saying that some of these things do cause issues. You've got the medical journals that support them with their science saying that they don't. You've got psychologists generally saying, I don't know about physical things. And then you got people like me who have been mind-body sufferers, got better, have a psychology degree, understand the psychology behind it, have been connected to the medical doctors in this field who can verify these things. You can either go to see them and get it ruled in, or if you've been to see like 10 doctors, even 2 doctors, and they've confirmed we can't find anything here, or what they did find is one of these debunked structural issues, you can dismiss that. Okay. Let's see. Marina then said, yes, the only reason I asked is because they do. Yep, I get it. Okay. Carrie Tischler said, just to add to Dan's point, until my doubt was down, my TMJ and lower back pain was constant and 24/7. I was in fear, pain, doubt cycle for 2 years. Once I was convinced it was mind-body, boom. Changes in intensity and days that are much better than others. Carrie, that is beautiful to hear. Fantastic to hear that you're doing better. It's also really helpful for everyone here to hear that bringing down doubt was key. Because, this is one of the things that I do a bit differently than even people in the mind-body field. I pay even more attention to what doubt does. The mind-body field's great. It's full of great people. They have great ways of helping. Nobody has all the answers of how to help. They do things in ways that I can learn from. I do things in ways that they can learn from. But one of the ways that they could learn from me is how important doubt is. Because even if you come to a mind-body space like this and you're getting your answers, you could hear something that makes you worry. Sometimes that's your own doubt kind of pulling in information and warping it and posing it to you in scary ways. But sometimes it's, somebody else said, I have this worry. And you're like, oh, yeah, I worry about that too. Or maybe even something that I say could set off a worry inadvertently. It's never my intention, but at least I'm attending to it. At least I'm watching out for it. And we as a community can watch out for that, because otherwise you could get all the help in the world and then have a doubt come in. And then you get knocked on your ass. So, Carrie, thank you for sharing that, the role of doubt and just how important it is. All right, jumping back to YouTube. And by the way, if I ever miss a question, please just ask it again. I don't mean to miss anybody. Anush, good to see you here. Hey, Dan, when I decide to get something done and start focusing on it, neck spasm becomes stiff. So am I forcing myself too much? I think I'm just trying to get something normal done. All right, I had a couple questions, Anush. So this is an advantage of my groups to the Q&A. The Q&A is great, but if Anush was in a group with me, I'd be able to ask him these questions. He'd be able to tell me right away, and we could just get further in one sitting. So let me tell you a little bit about my groups for anybody who's interested. On my website, www.crushingdoubt.com, you can get access to all of my different offerings. The book you can get on Amazon. So I highly recommend that. It's the most comprehensive resource for mind-body experience as I see it. And I really tried to pull in everything, every kind of question you could ask and wonder about why this person says this and this person says this. But my groups are available on there too. We just started up these new groups that are incredibly cost effective. They're only $100 a month, and you get to come to 3 different meetings that are up to 2 hours, where I answer questions and I help orient people to the work, and I essentially help them implement the system. And I wanted people to be able to get it at a very cost-effective rate where I could just help more people. So those groups are Mondays, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern, Tuesdays, 10 a.m. To 12 p.m. Eastern, and Wednesdays, we now have 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern. I wanted to get a variety of hours because there's people across the world who use this and need my interaction. So you can come to 1, 2, or 3 of them and get your questions answered, and we get more answers. Sorry, Anush, for the escape from the direct question, but now I'm going to get back to it. Here's the question that I want to ask you. When you said neck spasm becomes stiff, it made me wonder, what's the actual symptom? Because some people can describe a neck spasm in a certain way, and they mean one thing, whereas another person wouldn't see that as a spasm. So my question to you is, what's the actual symptom? When I heard neck spasm and then I heard stiff, those feel like different symptoms. I'm not saying they're not, Anush. I'm certainly not saying you're doing anything wrong in explaining it that way, but I'm wanting to know. For me, a neck spasm or a spasm of any kind is like the muscle really twitches and it hurts. And at the same time, there's something called fasciculations where the muscle twitches, but it doesn't hurt. Then there's stiffness. So this would be an example of, let's find out what is the actual symptom. And why am I asking? Well, this is an emotions column symptom, actually. It's coming up as an onset or an uptick. And emotions column symptoms are often very metaphorical. They tell us something about what's happening. Spasms tend to come from fear. Stiffness, that can have many metaphorical aspects to it, but it can come from feeling that you're stuck, not surprisingly, in terms of the language, right? Now, your question. So am I forcing myself too much? I think I'm just trying to get something normal done. Okay, I want to say something. This is for Anush, but it's for everybody. One of my action steps are new ways of thinking. Once we find out what the columns related problem is, we can pick different action steps about how we're going to think and how that's going to help. One action step that could help you, Anush, with this is it doesn't matter what you do. It matters what you're thinking while you do it. The problem's not that you're trying to get something done. The problem's not that you're focusing on it. The problem is what you think about that. If you're thinking, I can only do this for so long, then you start to get afraid or tense. But if you start to think, I can do this forever. I don't mean forever, because of course you got to go to sleep, and unfortunately we're mortal, so we can't do it forever. But what we can do is challenge our beliefs when they're limiting. And so I want to encourage you, Anush, you can do exactly what you're doing without the symptom. But to do that, we need to know what you're feeling in the moment. What is this emotions column onset? And what's the doubt that then sets in? Because it's kind of like a relay race. Emotions always starts it off, or almost always starts it off, unless there's some kind of physical event that made people doubt. And then the doubt comes in to take the baton. And the doubt runs the vast majority of the race. So Anush, I think you're just trying to get something normal done, yes, but there's feelings involved. There's fears involved. Maybe there's confusion involved, or lack of certainty, or even unanswered questions. But there's doubt coming in here to cement that. In addition, there's some kind of emotional experience we need to know about. All right, so we'll look for it. A DMR LCSW, thank you for joining us here on Instagram. Okay, Maria Llewellyn has a question. Hi, Dan. I'm wondering how to navigate the frustration and fear that I might never get better. Well, first of all, you are going to get better. Let's start there. I've been doing this work for over a year, yet I'm still experiencing pain. Okay. So you said, I'm wondering how to navigate the frustration and fear that I might never get better. So it's one thing for me to say you are going to get better. I am right about that, especially if you just keep doing the work. There's only one way that people don't get better from this, and that's if they never get their doubt under control. And unfortunately, that does sometimes happen for people, but only if they give up. If you don't give up and you keep working at this, especially if you keep asking your questions, you'll get answers. Questions are what I call the gold standard of doubt. When fear is down enough and confusion is low enough, you can start working in the positive side of doubt, which is simply lack of certainty and especially unanswered questions. Why is that the gold standard? Because if you don't have fear and confusion and you're asking questions that could help you if you got the answer, then that means you're going to get the help. So this is a good question you're asking. Let's get it answered as much as we can, and then do a follow-up question. And let's keep going until you get into a better headspace. Because think about it. When we develop mind-body symptoms, a lot of times what happens is a feedback loop between the mind and the body. We get a little worried. We get more symptoms. The symptoms make us more worried. That greater worry leads to more symptoms. We start to get into a negative feedback loop. No, not to be confused with a neuroplastic feedback loop, which is a higher level symptom, a higher level mind-body symptom that involves the whole central nervous system. Eventually, it can be calmed down just fine, just like everything else. But a feedback loop can be negative or it can be positive. You can start to get into a positive feedback loop. I just had this happen in one of my groups. By the way, I do these capped groups for people who want to keep the numbers lower. They're more expensive, but if you're interested, you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.com, and we can talk about whether you're a good fit for that group. And however I can help, I'm here. But as I think about you getting into this more positive feedback loop I'm talking about, I had a woman in group today who shared that I was away on vacation for 2 weeks and she got significantly better during that time. And part of it is because she was just in the right mindset. She had hit her stride and her doubt came crashing down. So Maria, the main reason that you've been doing this work for over a year, but you're still experiencing pain, hopefully it's lower than it was. I don't know. I'll have to hear from you. But the main reason you're still experiencing this is doubt. So how do you navigate the frustration and fear that you might never get better? Let's do doubt column work. Now, let me talk about what's involved there. In the doubt column, there are 3 basic steps. I keep it very simple. There's only 3 columns, and there's only a couple things you need to do in each column. And in the doubt column, we observe, articulate, and counter doubt. I'm going to explain what each one of those is. To observe doubt is to call it into question instead of just accept that, oh, this doubt's right. We call it into question. That doesn't mean we know it's not right, but we open the gates to the question, maybe it's not right. There's a lot of maybe in observing doubt. Next, we articulate it. It's one thing to say I'm frustrated and I am afraid, but why? What's the specifics? We get it articulated, Maria, and we have a much better chance of beating that doubt, because when you start to hear your doubts out loud, some of them are going to sound ridiculous. Some of them you're going to realize, but that's not actually entirely true. But if you don't articulate it, you don't get to see the distinctions. And then lastly is to counter, is to take that observed doubt that was called into question, the articulated one that was put into words, and start to counter it with different information. Here's a great example. Why did I get better, but you haven't yet? Well, I guarantee you something. It's not because you're different than me. It's the human condition to have the mind-body experience. You work the same as me, basically speaking. There should be no real difference. So then what is it? Well, is it that you're somehow not as good as me? No, of course not. What happened is my doubt was able to be brought down for whatever reason at that point. And a lot of times people are like, well, you did it quickly. And I say to them often, did I? Because I brought it down quickly after I got the information, but it took me 8 years. Now, why do I say that? Because in that I'm not saying it'll take 8 years for you, by the way, but in that 8-year time, I built up a lot of information. And so when I looked at my doubts, I looked at the information and I was like, you know what? That's actually true. There was this one time, mysteriously, in all that suffering of those 8 years, there was one time where for a couple of minutes, my back got better. I don't know what it was. To this day, I don't know what it was. But here's what I do know, Maria, is it was a piece of information. So what I want you to do is remember the overall mantra of my system is you make sense and your symptoms make sense. What we need to do is make sense of this doubt. We need to make sense of these symptoms and why they've lasted for over a year. If there's doubt there, that's your reason. If you doubt that you can bring down doubt, that's not true. And even if you can't do it yourself, come work with me. I'll help you do it. I'll implement it each week. Okay, now let's keep talking about it, but we got to look at the doubts. And here's another little tip that I gave to somebody else in my group. I was saying to him, you recognize when you have doubt, but you don't realize it, but you're actually choosing to continue to listen to it. Do not listen to doubts. Recognize they're lies. They're not to be trusted, and they're not to be listened to. Now, I'm not saying it's just easy to do it necessarily, but it is easier if you're calling into question, maybe I can just not listen to this. So, Maria, I get it. It's frustrating. You've been working at this for over a year, but you're still experiencing the pain. I'll tell you what that means. It means we're missing something. Now, it's possible that there's also a neuroplastic feedback loop going. That's the kind of thing that can last for longer sometimes. So maybe there's some of that. You and I should explore it. But I bet that's not what it is, because that's not usually the typical experience. People have pain that lasts for long periods of time until their doubt comes down. Listen to what Carrie just said. She was in fear, pain, doubt, and cycle for 2 years. But once she was convinced it was mind body, boom, changes in intensity and days that are much better than others. That's what's going to happen for you, Maria. And when you conquer one doubt and you start to have some success, you start to build up momentum in the opposite direction. Okay? Now, follow-up questions as needed. Debbie A., thank you for joining us all the way from England. She says, hey, all. Great to have you back, Dan. Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. Good to be back here with you. Okay, Susan Sereno says, I'm having difficulty getting to the emotions. I believe I'm having symptoms because of predictive coding. Okay, so predictive coding, there's lots of ways that we say this. People talk about doubt triggers. People talk about conditioned responses. People talk about it as predictive coding, meaning your brain is expecting certain things. So that may be. And Susan, I think we'll need to distinguish when is what. Let me help you distinguish that a little bit as a starting point. We'll see where this goes. But one thing that we can help you distinguish is that when you're doing a physical activity and then you get a symptom, that sounds like predictive coding. That sounds like a conditioned response. That sounds like a doubt trigger, these are all the same things. But if you are just kind of going about your business, doing a normal movement, or even just sitting there and you suddenly get a symptom, that sounds like an emotions column onset or uptick. So this is interesting because you're saying I'm having difficulty getting to the emotions. It could be that you're just having difficulty accessing what those emotions are, but you're starting to make gains in that because your doubt is down low enough now. Remember the flow? Bring down doubt, learn about the emotions, flow into power. Susan has brought down her doubt enough that she can often do the emotional work. This feels to me like doubt is trying to pull you back from it. It's trying to get you convinced, no, this is a predictive coding thing. It has nothing to do with emotions, which that's not exactly what you're saying. But I think that is, I think that's doubt trying to pull you away from the emotions. So let's look at it. But if we study it together, and this is something we can do in group, we can talk about, well, what was happening? When did the onset happen? Did it start when you were using your vacuum cleaner? Or did it start when you were lying in bed and you weren't doing anything physical? If you weren't doing anything, look at emotions. Even if you were doing something, if you really weren't worried about it, I'd still look at emotions. All right. So now you're having difficulty getting to the emotions. That's another thing I can help with, especially in group, because that's the way that we can interact on a regular basis. I can help you look at certain moments and understand how to decode what's happening in that unconscious emotional space. And that's the step we're on, Susan. So let's keep at it. All right. Beatrice says, hi all, nerve pain, blood flow change is the most challenging and painful condition I find. And then she says, also, I was just thinking about this bad week with swelling and rib strain, and that it was so hot without having access to AC. Is heat tolerance mind body? I was never this sensitive. Yes, there's a lot of mind body experience that can change heat sensitivity. A good example of it actually is one of my favorite movies is Napoleon Dynamite. There is a character named Pedro, and he gets really nervous about running for president, and he suddenly gets extremely hot on his head, so much so that he shaves his hair off because he thinks that's where it's coming from. Doesn't help at all because he was having a mind-body experience. Heat tolerance is a very, very common mind-body experience. So is things like sound sensitivity. Listen, anything the body can do, any experience we can have can get taken over by a mind-body process. So you had a bad week, but we all have good and bad weeks. Don't think of that as predictive. The key is to ride the waves. When you had a bad week, don't let doubt take over and run with it. When you have a good week, use that. Feel good about it. Keep going. But my general rule of thumb with a neuroplastic feedback loop is keep your doubt as low as you can for the highest percentage of the time you can. You're going to have doubts, but if you can just keep that doubt low for as large a percentage of the time, you will eventually start to make progress, and then you start to pick up momentum in the opposite direction. Rita, thanks for joining us here on Instagram. Good to see you again. She's another coach in the field who has done my training. Rita is a great coach for mind-body experience, and good to see you here. Big Man Mike, thank you for joining us here as well. And Amir, thank you for joining here, my friend. Please do let me know if you have any questions. All right, let me make sure I'm not missing any questions. Jumping back to Ani Crowfoot. Ani says, I understand your point about nerves healing, but how about old age neuropathy? Okay, well, I'm telling you this from the experiences that I've had, but also just from the logic of things. Most things in terms of pain don't really get worse with age. Some things do get worse with age, like our eyesight, our hearing, our muscle tone, our reflexes. Those things do get worse, but you know what doesn't is pain. Because if it did, there would be a dramatic increase in pain as we got older and older and older. And that's not what we see. Typically speaking, there's a lot more pain during the ages of maybe 30 to 80. That's the biggest pain ages. Maybe 35 to 75 even. It's what Dr. Sarno called the responsibility years. But Ani, I also know this just from experience. I worked with a guy who was, I think, in his late 70s, maybe early 80s, and he had neuropathy, and he thought it was from old age, and we just cured it. I do this over and over again with so many symptoms that I don't believe much of it's going to be anything but mind body. I often say doubt is guilty until proven innocent. It's usually a mind body symptom. Now, we do have to go to a doctor first, but typically speaking, a lot of people have already gone to a doctor or multiple doctors before they come to see me. I want them to get medically cleared because I'm not a medical doctor. But after they've been either medically cleared or diagnosed with one of those debunked diagnoses that we can dismiss, then we can treat as mind body with confidence. So old age neuropathy, to me, that's not actually likely to be what's happening at all. Here's what I think is happening, Ani, which is aging. And this is a Sarno line, classic line. Aging is enraging. We don't like to get older. We don't like mortality. So people who are older, if they're having neuropathy, it's usually because getting older gets on our nerves. So let's talk about it. All right. Foxy D says, hi, Dan, I'm new here. Does this work with PPD, dizziness? PPD is psychophysiological disorder, another way of talking about mind-body symptoms. Does this work with dizziness, rocking, swaying 24/7, The fear, anxiety, the doubt this will ever go. Yes, it does work with that. And in fact, I've worked directly with those symptoms. Sometimes even in myself a little bit, but I've worked with other people who have had it in pretty extreme form, and we got it under control. So this works with any symptom that you've already ruled out the basic medical reason, which there's not many medical reasons you'd be having that. Then you can work as a mind-body work with confidence. So let's talk more about it. We're going to wrap up here shortly, but you can come back here next week and keep asking questions. If you want to come see me in group, it's available on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com. If you want to check out my book, you will find things on dizziness and that sort of thing, vertigo in my book. But the key here is it doesn't matter what the symptom is, generally speaking, other than the fact that sometimes it's expressing some kind of metaphorical experience. But when it's so repeated, it's about doubt. You said the fear, anxiety, the doubt this will ever go. It will go. It can go, but you need to understand why it's there in the first place. It needs to make sense to you. And it needs to make sense to you why you're going to get better. All right, let's keep working at it. Keep the questions coming, please. All right, Anush says neck muscles were already tight. It gets tighter. It's just an increase in intensity. So does that mean it doesn't suddenly spasm where it hurts? Because that's what I think of with a spasm. This could just be muscle tightness. When I say just, I don't mean that dismissively. Like that's still really not fun. But I'm just trying to get the nature of what the symptom actually is so I can know what you're dealing with. All right, now let's get back to you on that with some follow-up, though. You know what, I'll answer, since we're probably not going to have time for follow-up, I'm just going to answer it based on what I can answer with. So if it's tight, I think you're feeling tense. It's literally what it is. What your body feels is often a physical manifestation of your emotional experience. You're feeling tense. You're feeling like, can I do this? Is it going to be okay? And here's a little tip to concentrate on. When you're feeling tense, a huge thing to concentrate on is to get your breathing back to normal. Get it back to deep breathing. Pause. Give yourself, a 2-minute break even. It's not that you're pushing yourself too much, but at the same time, give yourself some space to breathe, to calm it down, and then it'll start to go. All right. But you also could start to think about the emotions column experience. What is making you tense about it? What's making you worried? All right. We'll keep going with that. Okay. Amit Goswami, thank you for joining us here. He has a question. He says, does it work with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia? Absolutely. I've worked with people with those as well. It works very well for those things. I have a list in my book of things that it works with. And it was probably 2.5 to 3 pages long of the book. It might be even more, 3.5 pages, something like that. And that's not even a fully exhaustive list, but I tried to get everything in there because I know people look at it and they're like, is my thing here? Because if it's not, maybe it's not. Listen, the amount of things I listed there should tell you it's head to toe, everything. Chronic fatigue, though, and fibromyalgia, good news, Amit, those are ones that it works with on a regular basis. That doesn't mean that the other ones don't work on a regular basis. I'm just saying I see that a lot and I get it better. And I've had symptoms that are kind of similar to a lot of those things. So Amit says, do you recommend the book or joining the group? This is, I don't mean this to sound like I'm just trying to sell you things, but if you do both, it's the best. There's a woman in group who said to me recently that she loves to read the book while doing the group because the combination of the two just gets her nice and calm. If I had to choose between the two, some of that's going to depend on resources. If you don't have a lot of resources, the book is the best thing you can do because you have it with you all the time and it's as comprehensive as I could get. I answered every question that I wanted to answer there. But if you feel like you need to interact with me directly, then I'd come to group. Bottom line, best thing you can do, buy the book, get to reading it right away. That's on Amazon under the name Crushing Doubt. And come to see me in group. And you can just try it out even. You can just try it out for a month. Come see me and see how I can help you implement this. All right? I'd be happy to work with you. Thanks, Amit. All right, Susan, we're going to finish up on this. She says, Dan, I have to work in group about getting to emotions, but what can I do now? Yes. Well, one thing you can do is you can start on an emotions column list. So in the emotions column, the key thing that you do in the emotions column is to create what I call an emotional themes menu. Now, that doesn't mean a list of feelings. It means a list of experiences and situations that bother you, that make for an emotional experience. Things like, I don't like being gaslit. I don't like it when people don't trust me. I don't like it when people project. I don't like it when people don't treat people fairly. These are just examples. They're come from my own emotional themes. But you can work on those emotional themes. So, and you know what, Susan, I would love it if you would, because when you come to group, we'll have a leg up. We can then say, aha, now I can look at this. Here's the other thing. It gets you thinking about the emotional world. So just try it. You can do a lot more than you think. This is a confidence issue on this. I think you don't feel confident you can do it. I think you're going to be able to do a lot more than you think. Susan then says, no such thing as old age neuropathy. I agree with that. There isn't. There's no such thing as old age anything that happens except for all of the declines in functions. And then eventually we are mortals, unfortunately. So, yes, there's nothing you need to worry about. Getting older is hard, especially emotionally, but it doesn't have to be, especially if we can get to a good place with ourselves in that power column, align with ourselves. We can live a great life, even in old age. And that's good. That's the thing to do. All right. We're going to wrap up there for tonight, guys, but it is a pleasure being here with you. I'll be back here next week, Thursdays, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, and we'll keep it up. Keep those questions coming. Your questions are key to getting you answers. Keep it up.